Seriously, who's blowing up my phone? Oh, yeah. Powerball.
Big news. Powerball now draws 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. Play now. Please play responsibly. Must be 18 years or older to purchase player claim.
Seriously, who's blowing up my phone? Oh, yeah. Powerball.
Big news. Powerball now draws 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. Play now. Please play responsibly. Must be 18 years or older to purchase player claim.
3, 2, 1.
This is Chargers Unleashed podcast. Here are your hosts, Dan Wolfenstein and Jake Hefner.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolfenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. Today's show, of course, being brought to you by UFC Fit in Temecula, Golden Road Brewery, Charger Bolt Family, Tick Pick, and Bet Online. If this is your first time tuning into the show, you make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And, of course, on Apple Podcast and Spotify, or wherever you choose to digest your weekly NFL podcast. Dan Wolfenstein has been teasing it. It is definitely going to be a busy week for Chargers Unleashed, and he teased it over the last couple of days. We do have a special guest in store for today, as we are in the thick of draft season, or as we like to call it, lying season, but more so draft season. We're 3.5 weeks out from the NFL draft. Now, none other than PFF's own Austin Gayle. Dan Wolfenstein, I know that you're excited about this. Let's hear it.
Austin Gayle might be the smartest NFL draft analyst that I've ever met. Knows literally everything, feels like the encyclopedia of all things NFL draft, and honestly, such a good dude. This was such a good conversation that we're going to have with him. We're going to talk about all kinds of things. We're going to talk about the Chargers. We're going to talk about risers, fallers, potential trade scenarios, you name it. And some guys that we might not necessarily have heard before that Chargers fans might want to go and take some passes at on the YouTube and go see if these guys could potentially be fit for the Chargers, because if he says it, there's a good chance he's right.
And real quick, Dan, we have to pay the bills here by talking about our newest sponsors on Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info and odds. Find all the latest developments, including this week's odds for the Masters Championship. I know we're all psyched out of our minds about that to get underway. And
Tiger!
Of course, Major League Baseball kicks off as well tomorrow. So make sure you go to Bet Online. It is your continued source for all your sporting wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so join today. Learn why everyone is saying Bet Online is the fastest and easiest way to wager on popular sports and games. Bet Online, where the game starts. Use the promo code BELIEVE to get signed up. Bet Online.
All right. Without further ado, Austin Gayle, PFF, NFL draft guru. Let's talk one-on-one with him. Let's see how much information we can learn from him. Guys, can't wait for this discussion. We are so fortunate today. We have the director of content at Pro Football Focus, the NFL draft expert himself, and as of today, the Jerry Rice of NFL draft information, according to Kyle Brandt on Good Morning Football. Mr. Austin Gayle graces us with his time and presence to take a deep dive into the 2022 NFL draft class. Of course, plethora of Chargers storylines and topics. Austin, welcome to Chargers Unleashed. How are you, my friend?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Of course. Now, we're excited. We are full tilt in NFL draft season. NFL topics galore circulating. You're talking about people who's falling, who's rising, who should be taken at 17 for the Chargers, who are some of the top, prospects, whether it's different positions like guard, tackle, wide receiver, safety, you name it. We're going to get into all kinds of stuff, as well as possible trade scenarios for the Chargers. But first, I guess, topic to kind of kick us off. Chargers offensive line. Let's look at draft prospects. Chargers offensive line improved drastically year over year. They went from being one of the worst to one of the best. They signed Rashawn Slater. They got Matt Filer, got Corey Linsley, but they could still use some help on the right side. Picking at 17, depending on what they do with Matt Filer, if kicking him out to guard or tackle currently, whether it's at 17 or maybe a few day two tackles or guards, like who could you see the Chargers taking a long look at to kind of fit into this Justin Herbert kind of Joe Lombardi system at right guard or right tackle?
Yeah, I do think that at 17, they're going to be looking for a high-profile offensive tackle or a high-profile wide receiver. I do think that that's where their needs make the most sense, right? And at right tackle specifically, Charles Cross of Mississippi State, who is PFF's offensive tackle one right now, a top 5 player on our board. From what I've heard around the league is lower on Charles Cross than maybe the media is. He could be a guy that slips outside the top 15, hell, even outside the top 20. Highest graded pass protector this past year, has over 500 pass protecting snaps in Mike Leach's offense at Mississippi State this past season. That matters, right? He's also a very young player. He's a smooth athlete. I do think that Charles Cross at right tackle, opposite of Rashawn Slater, you're putting yourself in a really good position to have, two bookends that protect, Justin Herbert up front. And in terms of guard, I don't think there's a guard I'm taking at 17. Say they do trade back and maybe look at Zion Johnson, the Boston College offensive lineman, as a first-round player. I think that could be an option as well. But day 2, I think a lot of opportunities open up to go bring in some guards, right? I think Dylan Parham of Memphis is someone I really like. Darian Kennard, the Kentucky offensive tackle who played tackle in the SEC but probably plays guard in the NFL. That's another high-floor player. Max Mitchell, who played offensive tackle at Louisiana, maybe better projects as a guard. That's another player I think you can take on day 2 and slot him in that spot.
Got it. Now you mentioned Charles Cross there, and I heard the episode you had with NFL Stock Exchange, Trevor Sick about Connor Rogers, and you had mentioned that there were some folks who were talking crazy talk on the inner circles about Charles Cross not being taken in the first round. What? Explain the bananas of that information. Like, what are in that mindset? What are they seeing? Why is he falling from what presumably was top 5, top 10 to maybe not top 32?
Yeah, I'm stunned by that. I think a lot of that too could be smoke, right? It could be teams looking to get a really good offensive tackle prospect to fall, like teams purposefully not talking about him highly. And when you look at, the person that had Charles Cross falling outside the first round, it was Bruce Feldman of The Athletic, who in his mock draft really looks to position what coaches are saying, who they're talking about specifically. And I wouldn't be surprised if evaluators and coaches weren't talking a lot about Mississippi State's Charles Cross if they're looking to bring him down and make him available in that 15 to 20, 15 to 25 range. So I do think he goes in the first round. I'd be stunned if he's still available after pick 20, pick 21, right? He's that good of a prospect at a premium position. I think there's only real, 3 offensive tackles where I'm really excited about taking him inside the first 20 picks, and that's Evan Neal of Alabama, Ike Ekwonu of NC State, and then obviously Charles Cross of Mississippi State.
I'll tell you right now, if he's there at 17 and let's just say Jameson Williams or whoever is pipe dream is not there, there's no way he makes it past 17. There's just no way. Okay, you mentioned lying season. You're hearing all kinds of smoke, all kinds of crazy takes. Everyone talks about there's no way X player or Y player is going to fall at that position. But every year you see it happen. You see it with Rashawn Slater, Owusu Koromora just last year. Fell much further than we expected, but somehow something always happens. You mentioned Charles Cross. Talk to us about some of the players that maybe are possible fallers, maybe who are rising a ton, who you actually think could fall or rise a ton than what we've seen in a lot of the kind of mock drafts or in the public and media.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a chance that we see, Devontae Wyatt fall a bit further than we thought, right? Devontae Wyatt, maybe this top 16 type of player. I think there's more opportunity for him to be a 20 to 32 range, which, doesn't necessarily fill a need for the Los Angeles Chargers anymore now after grabbing Austin Johnson and Sebastian Joseph Day in free agency. But he's a guy that I thought originally would be this top 16, top 20 player, but I'm hearing more and more now that he's falling a bit. Tyler Linderbaum, the center out of Iowa, is another guy that I think is no longer even being rumored as a top 15, top 20 pick. I think it's more likely that he falls in the 20 to 32 range. I do think he ultimately comes off the board in the first round, but maybe there is a chance he falls outside the first round too, just purely from a positional value perspective. And some teams maybe souring on him due to, lack of arm length, right? Which is obviously super important at the offensive line position. David Ajabo is falling, but I think everyone's buying into that. Obviously with the torn Achilles there at his pro day, that's a huge concern for him and prayers go out to him. It's such a sad situation to see David Ajabo go down. And Bernard Ryman is another one that I think is falling. He's a top 15 player on PFF's draft board, the Austrian-born offensive tackle for Central Michigan, but not a lot of the league is as high on him as PFF is. He's a guy that does need to get a lot better in the NFL. Talking to Paul Alexander, the former NFL offensive line coach who's now working with Bernard Ryman, he says there's no player in this class that takes to coaching better. Does he need to get better? Absolutely, but he's a guy that can do it. So I'm betting on him as a top 20, top 25 player, but maybe the league isn't.
Now, okay, last question on that. You mentioned your defensive line. Jordan Davis is another guy. Everyone, it feels like, is clamoring for him to go to the Chargers at 17. Now it feels like there's no way he falls to 17. Could he fall to 17 realistically? Do you see that happening?
I doubt it. I really do. I don't think he gets past the Eagles even in this draft. I think that would be a tough spot to see. I think there's a really good chance he goes inside the top 10 now. I think Atlanta could take him at 8. That's how high. I think Washington could take him at 11. Houston at 13, right? I think Houston at 13 makes too much sense. It's a team that only needs really good football players right now. It doesn't have obvious needs at any position, right? They need to go bring in anyone they can. So I think Jordan Davis could go at 13, 14, then you get into the 15, 16 range. I would be really, really surprised if the Chargers have a chance at Jordan Davis at 17.
Now, Austin, free agent frenzy this year definitely did not disappoint, especially not for the AFC West looking into this season. AFC West is arguably going to be the most competitive division in the entirety of the NFL. You have all the moves that the Chargers have done the first 2 days. Obviously, the Denver Broncos acquiring Russell Wilson in a trade, the Raiders getting Devontae Adams, and of course, the Chiefs still building after life of Tyreek Hill and bringing in Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Juju Smith-Schuster, all just trying to compete with one another. Now, we had your colleague Trevor Sikkema in here about a month ago, just before free agency kicked off. And it was a very different landscape as far as the priorities goes. And obviously with the Chargers giving away some of their draft capital to go and get Khalil Mack, do you think, and I've always been a big proponent of this, and Dan knows this very well, that I'm high on, based on where I've heard people like you guys talk about, and obviously a lot of other people talk about how they predict the board is going to fall. Ultimately, you had just mentioned a little bit there with Jordan Davis, but by the time 17 rolls around, in order to stay competitive, especially when you see teams in your own division like the Kansas City Chiefs have 3 picks in the top 3 rounds, would trading back from 17 and getting one of these wide receiver needy teams like a New England, a Dallas, a Green Bay to jump up, get some extra draft capital, possibly recoup that second round pick, would that possibly be the best course of action?
I think so. I think trading down, especially with the team in the first round, is something I always advocate for, especially if you don't have an obvious need. Now, if I think Jameson Williams is there, Jordan Davis is there, Charles Cross is there, then you probably stay put. You take one of those players. Now, if they're in a position where they don't love it and they're forcing a different need, they can trade back and look for teams, like you said, these teams that want a receiver or need a receiver that want to come up. I think that makes a ton of sense as well. I think them trading back, adding picks, potentially adding, and moving their picks more into the 20-30 range, and then picking up an additional third rounder or whatever it is. I do think that it's really important too, because they need to get cheaper, right? They need to get consistently cheaper with their roster. Justin Herbert's going to get paid here in the next 2 or 3 years. Khalil Mack, obviously now on the contract. JC Jackson getting a monster deal. Mike Williams getting the new contract. You can't afford literally can't afford to continue to keep paying players at a high rate if you're not hitting on some of these players and also hitting on rookie contracts. It's so important to add rookie contracts to your slate and high performing rookie contracts, so that way you're able to balance the books pretty effectively.
Now, you had mentioned it a little bit with the offensive linemen. It seems like offensive linemen and wide receiver are going to be the coveted positions here in the first round, as far as teams possibly moving down, moving up, whatever it is. But to get some of these guys, and especially with the wide receiver class this year, very different from past drafts. And we obviously know that the Chargers re-signed Mike Williams. They brought in Gerald Everett, try to add keep and add a few more weapons around Justin Herbert. But they still are lacking that speed element that they need in the offense. And already having Keenan Allen, obviously could use a little bit more yak, use a little bit more speed. And at 17, the Chargers fan base, Chargers Twitter in general, has just been all over the place as it relates to their guy that they want at the wide receiver position. And obviously with Jameson Williams looking like he's going to be healthy, Chris Olave, possibly Treylon Burks, all three bring a different style to the NFL and a huge demand, obviously, for wide receiver this year. So talk about the difference between these guys and where do you see them most likely as far as their ceiling or their floor, possibly some teams that they don't fall past.
Yeah, I think Jameson Williams is their best fit, right? You talk about building your receiving core like a basketball team. You want all these different skill sets, complementary skill sets. Mike Williams, the big body contested catch receiver that can completely play on the outside. Then you have obviously Keenan Allen, who's this slot type that doesn't have the speed anymore, but is a sure-handed receiver. And then you bring in Jameson Williams to just light a match with this receiving core and help them push the ball deep. I like that fit. I also really like Chris Olave to the Los Angeles Chargers at 17. He's not the yak player they probably want him to be this complementary skill set, but it's a guy that consistently creates separation. And you want to add a third piece. If there's anything we've learned over the past, 2 2 to 3 years that Super Bowl competitive teams need. It's not, completeness in the receiving core. It's eliteness. You need multiple really high-end receivers, right? You look at the Cincinnati Bengals, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. You look at the Los Angeles Rams with Cooper Kupp and then Robert Woods healthy. They still went out and got Odell Beckham Jr. Obviously, Robert Woods got hurt after that, but they knew continuing to add elite high-end talents, high-end pass-catching talent is what's going to make them Super Bowl competitive. The Chiefs have been that, obviously, with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. What people don't bring up enough about that Chiefs run is they also had Sammy Watkins, who was a really big part of that offense. And the Super Bowl after that, Byron Pringle was their starting outside receiver, right? Whereas a little bit different, you don't have that multiple pass-catching weapon. So I think they could lock into multiple receivers here. Jameson Williams, I think, would be a great one. Garrett Wilson, if he falls that far, Olave, if he falls that far, and then you're starting to get into the Treylon Burks conversation as well. I think 17 might be a bit rich. There might be other players available if you're looking at Treylon Burks as the one you want to bring in at 17, players at other positions, but I don't think you can go wrong with any of those guys, Olave, Wilson, or Williams.
Not here getting me salivating here about wide receivers being taken, but I think the Chargers, if there's one other position that the Chargers fan base, I think, are looking after as this could possibly be the fifth infinity stone, so to speak, is going after a corner. They got J.C. Jackson. He's obviously one of, if not the best corner on the market. They drafted Asante Samuel Jr. last year. They got Mike Davis. Also, Derwin James is back there in secondary. Today, even, we saw Coach Staley talking to Derek Staley at LSU's Pro Day. How do you see this cornerback group shaking out? And how do you see the crop being available at 17, or Chargers would have a second round pick? So at this point, so what if it's round 3? Maybe top 17 guys, and then maybe a day 2, day 3 couple gems that you think might be someone that folks aren't necessarily knowing about, but hey, you heard it here first. Austin Gayle's giving us a scoop.
Derek Stingley Jr. falls to 17. I think it's a sprint to Cardin situation. That would be absurd. And I think that's another player where you could be theoretically buying the dip on, and that, people don't think he's an alpha. He's not a chirpy corner. People question if he's going to play through injury and all this stuff. And you haven't seen elite high-end production since his true freshman season. I'm buying all of that. If he falls to 17, I think that's a home run selection for the Los Angeles Chargers. And they're getting one of the best players in the draft at 17. Now, if Stingley, McDuffie, Gardner are all off the board at 17, I don't think you look at this cornerback class at that pick. Maybe they trade back and add some others. I like Andrew Booth Jr. and Kyrie Elam as other first-round talent type of corners. But then you go into day 2, there's some slot guys that you could buy into, but they have their slot guy. There's not really a lot of outside cornerback talent that you're starting from day 1 on day 2, day 3. You could buy into some prospects that have good athleticism. You got obviously Tariq Woolen of UTSA. You have the Sam Houston State corner, Zion McCollum, but those guys aren't starters, right? I think they're looking for starters, and that's why I look at linebacker as an opportunity on day 2 and day 3 for the Los Angeles Chargers. This linebacker class is so good. There's so many talented players that are going to be available on day 2 that could come in and start, right? Same with interior defensive line. Travis Jones is not being talked about enough. UConn defensive tackle that I think, because Jordan Davis is this insane player, this insane athleticism, no one's talking about Travis Jones, a guy that you can take in the second round that I think can be immediately a run-stuffing DT nose tackle type.
So you can kind of go back, trade back, maybe get a second-round pick, get Travis Jones. You can get a receiver maybe late first round, or get corner, whoever it is. Jake's been clamoring about Travis Jones ever since ever since Senior Bowl. It was ridiculous. Jake, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited would you be? What would we see if Jake Hefner was watching and pick 17 comes, trade back out of the first round, 25?
Naked cartwheels, most likely, outside, of course, because nobody needs to see that horrible image. But no, it's a good transition, because I like the fact that we're talking about not only Travis Jones, but I wanted to get back to the interior of the defensive line, as obviously that was the biggest priority for the Chargers coming in. And they were very aggressive in their pursuit of Austin Johnson and Sebastian Joseph Day and bringing them in to fortify, get younger at the interior of the defensive line. And as Dan pointed out, the Chargers do not have a second round pick as it stands right now. So based off of what you were saying, Austin, and how you see the board falling with Jordan Davis not being there, not 100% sure if Devontae Wyatt would be worth that 17 selection, and obviously in the situation that they may trade back and possibly take a Travis Jones, who are some day 2 defensive tackles that outside of Travis Jones that you had mentioned that maybe aren't getting enough notoriety if the Chargers want to continue to fortify the interior of the defensive line?
Yeah, I think, Travis Jones is definitely one of my guys that I like there. I think after that, you look at Neil Farrell, who's the LSU defensive tackle, another big boy that I think can two gap at the next level, maybe isn't a pass rusher. Perion Winfrey and Logan Hall, I like a lot as day two players. I don't know if I necessarily see them as like high ceiling type of players. Logan Hall, he has the size, his athleticism, and you never really saw it all put together at Houston. And even at the Senior Bowl, he didn't pop off the tape as much as you wanted to. Some other players that Otito Ogbanaya of UCLA, I think is a fiery player that playing on the interior defensive line in the NFL, he could have some success. But I don't really love the depth of this interior defensive line class. I think it's Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis, Travis Jones, and then you start to get into situations where you're either betting on a guy being a lot better in the NFL, or you're betting on someone that's really just a two-down run stuffer that doesn't have the ceiling, say, of a Travis Jones or a Jordan Davis.
Now, I have a question we ask everyone, but before that, Jake, I believe we wanted to talk about running backs. I know that there's been all kinds of talk about like where to take running backs. Jake, what do we do at this position?
Austin, I mean, with what they have now in Austin Eckler and still trying to find a secondary option behind him. Obviously, it hasn't been working out the way that they would hoped with Joshua Kelly, with Larry Roundtree. I don't see the Chargers pursuing this until day 3 at best, but this is a unique running back class that on day 3 of the draft, you can pick up a lot of highly contributing players. Can you give us some insight as far as who are some of your favorites come day 3?
Yeah, I think you have to look at size, right? I think that's what they probably want with Austin Eckler, and he's the pass catcher. He's just do-it-all back. Don't call for a second Austin Eckler anything more than a 3-down player. Like, I think he can do anything. He's one of the most chiseled running backs, if not players, in the NFL. I've always been high on Austin Eckler. I was one of the few people that wrote Austin Eckler would be better than Melvin Gordon when we were having those conversations like 2 or 3 years ago when he was still a backup. I've always been a big fan of his. I think what you're looking for is really someone that can complement his skill set. And I have this kind of thumper tier of backs that will probably be available from like round 3 to round 6 that people can buy into. Damian Pierce, who's a bowling ball of butcher knives coming out of Florida, who just thumps through the hole. There's a play where he runs through the hole with his helmet off and still keeps trying to break tackles. Like, that's the type of player that I think they want to complement that offense. Other guys like that can hit the hole with square shoulders and really run over people. Hassan Haskins of Michigan, Tyler Algier, I comp closely to Jordan Howard, who can be a short yardage back for you if you want him to. Kyron Williams of Notre Dame didn't test well, should be available at a discount in the 6th or 7th round, but can offer as a pass catcher and also as a bit of a thumper as well. If you're looking at speed, right? If you want to bring in some athletic or burstiness or explosiveness, you got Zaquandre Wright of South Carolina, Rashad White, Arizona State, James Cook of Georgia. That's where you're adding fire to fire with Austin Eckler already as this pass catching back, and you bring some other guys that have that speed as well. I don't think you can go wrong. My thing is that this running back class, I think, is going to be very similar to future running back classes. I don't think we're going to be talking about a lot of like true first rounders, but more so, what do you need? There's only 6 running backs in the NFL that start over 60% of the snaps. There's not a lot of starters, right? Everyone else is a committee type of player or injuries, whatever it may be. You're looking to bring in complements to your current backfield, not necessarily starters or guys that can start.
Now, before we get to our moonshot predictions and requests here, we're closing out Austin Gayle, PFF NFL Draft Guru. I'm going to give you 3 wide receivers. You're going to tell me which one of these guys are probably going to be day 2, possibly day 1, but most likely day 2. Sky Moore, Calvin Austin, and a guy at North Dakota State University. Which one of those 3 would you say fits the Chargers the most?
I like Sky Moore. Sky Moore is a separator, great yak player. He's my highest ranked player of those 3 that you mentioned. It makes too much sense. And Calvin Austin, I think, is a phenomenal athlete, but 5'7", 170. He did play 90% of his reps on the outside. I don't see him having that same usage in the NFL. I see him more as like a Rondale Moore from a usage standpoint. And then for Christian Watson, I just don't think that's what the Chargers need. I mean, Christian Watson, in my opinion, doesn't have great ball skills. Yeah, he has speed. Yeah, he has size, but I don't think he's like this polished receiver that they can really take advantage of. I'd honestly rather them develop Josh Palmer at Tennessee before they really start to invest resources in developing another receiver that I think needs a lot of work at the next level in Christian Watson. They need a guy to come in while they continue to develop Josh Palmer, someone that can come in and win right now. That's Sky Moore. I think Calvin Austin's that player if you use him in a gadget role as well.
Got it. All right. Time for home run picks. Put you on the spot here. Palm sweaty. Home run picks. Okay. We're going to go day 1, day 2, day 3. We're going to pick one for each. Who would be the Chargers, all things considered, all positions? If you are on the clock, if you're Tom Telesco, let's say you stay at 17, who is your home run pick for the Chargers day 1, day 2, and then pick one of day 3?
home run pick for the Los Angeles Chargers. I don't want to say a guy that probably won't be there, right? I think Derek Stingley is off the board, Jordan Davis is off the board, and Jameson Williams is off the board. I think the home run pick there is Charles Cross. I think Charles Cross, Mississippi State, if he's available at 17, which we've consistently seen happening, him mocked in that 20 to 32 range, hell, even outside the first round. That is the home run pick for the Los Angeles Chargers. They get him to pair up with Rashawn Slater. I think that's fantastic. Day 2, that's where you're looking more at some of these defensive tackles, right? I think a home run pick, if they can get their hands on Travis Jones sometime on day 2, I think that's a huge win. Off-ball linebacker as well. You get Chad Muma of Wyoming in this defense on day 2. That is a slam dunk for this team. And then on day 3, let's go get that gadgety player. I think you go get Bo Melton of Rutgers, a guy that can work from the slot, 4.3 speed, guys from Jersey, former 4-star recruit that he had offers to Michigan. He had offers to these bigger Power 5 schools, but he wanted to stay in Jersey. That's why he committed to Rutgers, and he had a lot of success for them. I think he needs to add some polish here and there, but immediately can start in the slot, can immediately make an impact as an athlete. I like him a lot as well.
Austin Gayle bringing in the fire. Okay, now, my big 4 that I would hope to have at 17. One of these guys would be like my dream scenario between Jordan Davis, Jameson Williams, I'll just say 3, and Derek Stingley. If one of those 3 guys are there, somehow miraculously, someone clearly made a mistake. Which one of those 3 would you take?
Man, I'd probably take Jordan Davis, if I'm being honest. I think I do take Jordan Davis there. It's too rare. It's too rare of a size athleticism combination to kind of let pass. I think Stingley, maybe I consider him too, but I don't know. I think Jordan Davis falling that far, I think they should jump on it. Immediately impacts that defense. And you have Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Jordan Davis. That front 4 is just going to be absolutely dominant with a legitimate rotation on the back end as well. And then the secondary, with J.C. Jackson, Asante Samuel Jr., Nasir Adderley, Derwin James. I mean, this is a really good defense that I don't even know if Brandon Staley could lose with.
Okay, now just overall, before we close out, what is your take, or what are you hearing about, like, who are the Los Angeles Chargers? Like, who should we expect them? Like, what's the floor ceiling? Everyone talks about on paper. We hate that phrase. Last year was kind of a build year, but also like there's some disappointment. Like, who are they in your opinion?
Los Angeles Chargers are a young team, very young team with a young quarterback and a young coach that know on paper that they're very good. And I think Jack Del Rio, when he was coaching the Oakland Raiders a long time ago, said in a young competitive teams like build, their first few seasons, you're learning how to compete and learning how to get to close games. In this next tier of jumping up, it's winning close games. And I think the Chargers now are in that tier where you need to win close games. And that comes with experience. The only thing it comes with experience. Everyone brings up playoff experience and NBA finals experience. And that the reason you bring that stuff up is because that's who wins close games. Close games are won with experience and guys that have been there before. And the Chargers now, going through this and entering their 3rd year with Justin Herbert and Staley obviously entering his 2nd year, the coach there, I think now they're going to start to pick up that experience. And they added some of that experience too, right? J.C. Jackson, Khalil Mack, Sebastian Joseph Day. They're adding veteran experience that knows how to win those close games. So I do think that they are, again, going to be in a lot of close games next year, and I would bet on them winning a lot more of them than they did last year.
Austin Gayle, PFF guru, bringing fire all day. As the kids say, Austin, no cap. You may be the hardest working NFL draft analyst out there right now, and it shows in your wealth of knowledge. You're like an encyclopedia. Just came off Good Morning Football. You're probably on your 3rd cup of coffee today. Just did an episode with Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers for NFL Stock Exchange. You're everywhere grinding the tape. All of us appreciate it. Austin Gayle, you can find him on Twitter at PFF_Austin Gayle. Austin, thank you so much for hopping on. Anything you want to tell the great people before we log off?
Make sure to check out PFF.com. You can follow me on Twitter at PFF_Austin Gayle. And you can check out my podcast, Tailgate with Mike Renner. We record 3 or 4 episodes a week.
Beautiful. Austin, thank you so much, man. It's been a pleasure. Congrats to you on all your success. Can't wait to see more of it. We'll talk soon. All right, buddy?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Seriously, who's blowing up my phone? Oh, yeah. Powerball.
Big news. Powerball now draws 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. Play now. Please play responsibly. Must be 18 years or older to purchase player claim.
Seriously, who's blowing up my phone? Oh, yeah. Powerball.
Big news. Powerball now draws 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. Play now. Please play responsibly. Must be 18 years or older to purchase player claim.